name is Lady J, and I'm the owner of LadyJ Media Butterfly Entertainment. Now, don't go anywhere because we have some really great shows coming up for you. I'd like to invite you to be a part of LadyJ Media. If you want to have a show, let me know. My number is 443-297-4753, or you can email me at ladyjwub@gmail.com. That's ladyjwub@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow that butterfly because you never know where she's going to land. You are tuned in to What Up Baltimore online radio. Please note that the views and opinions expressed are of the host and not of LadyJ Media. Thank you and enjoy the show. Hey everybody, this is Lady J. Welcome to this is just a special show. I don't have a name for it. We're just doing a 5 o'clock show today because we have a crisis going on in our city and we're going to talk about it. So I want to welcome Jason Rodriguez, Yolanda Pulley, and also Pastor Shannon Wright. We want to welcome everybody to the show. I am concerned. I'm a concerned citizen because I did have a child that was in school. He's 25 now, but I do have nieces and nephews. I have little cousins that are in school right now. And y'all, we have a big crisis going on in Baltimore City. Before we get started, I want to make sure that everybody shares the video. Let everybody know that we're on. You can also tune in to, if you go to LadyJ Media, you'll be able to also listen to us on the radio. If you go to ladyjmedia.com, you can listen to us on the radio. If you would like to watch us on Facebook, you can go to What Up Baltimore Online Radio, or you can go to YouTube and look at What Up Baltimore TV. Before we get started, I want to also offer condolences to Yolanda and what she's going through right now. I'll let her share that, but I definitely want to offer our condolences because that's another crisis we have going on in the city with this crime. So, that's a whole nother conversation. But tonight we're going to be talking about what's going on with our Baltimore City schools. Because y'all, I don't know what's going on. So hopefully they can help me because I don't have a clue. I've been trying to figure it out my own self. So we have some people on tonight who are going to talk about it because they have a rally coming up tomorrow. We want to make sure that everybody is informed, what's going on. So you can definitely show up for the rally tomorrow. So everybody, welcome to the show. Welcome to LadyJ Media. I'm just going to go right in. And I want to start off with Pastor Shannon Wright because I saw you on, I think you were on the news. I forgot what day it was. I saw you on the news and you were really pushing for Dr. Santalisa, for her, to her resign, be terminated, whatever you want to call it. I know all of you are, but I wanted you to tell us a little bit about what you were talking about for those who missed it on the news. I forgot what day it was. You can let us know whatever day that was.
So the whole push to remove Dr. Santalisa is based on performance. Graduation rates are falling. SAT scores are falling. We still have schools and students with zero proficiency. 41%, I believe, was the number that was quoted, of students have a 1.0 or below grade point average. And those are all very valid reasons why it makes no sense that Dr. Santalisa is the highest paid superintendent in the state of Maryland, governing the lowest performing district in the state of Maryland. But more importantly, this effort is an example of how folks in the city need to come together. I first reconnected with Yolanda at your town hall, Lady J. Mm-hmm. And she and Jason were really pushing and talking about education. And in the last election cycle, all the mayoral candidates were talking about it. But it's interesting to see how many were actually willing to still work on it and actually do something about it. Right, so I joined in with them. and what they're doing. And we together are trying to bring all the resources we can to the table to not just get rid of Dr. Santelises, but really make them accountable. They have to be accountable.
Right. Real quick, because I said something to one of the politicians about how much she was making, and they kind of, went off on me a little bit because they said she deserves it. But anyway, can you just tell us how much money she's making right now?
The last figures I saw were $340,000 a year.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's a lot of money, but
It
that's a
is.
lot of money. So, for us to be having all the stuff that's going on. So, Jason, tell us why you're involved in all of this. Jason, can you hear me?
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yep. Yep, I can hear
Okay.
you.
I'd like to piggyback off of what was just discussed in reference to CEO's pay. What's interesting is that the New York City superintendent of schools makes about $40,000 less than what Dr. Santelises is currently making, and has over a million students. Over a
Mm-hmm.
million students. That is 1,150% more students than what Dr. Santelises has, and you don't see the same failure rate or the same issues going on in New York State. And they spend almost equivalent, about the same amount of money per capita per child as we
Mm-hmm.
do here. Close to almost $14,000 is spent per student in New York City. So we're not getting the value of what we're really investing into our educational system. Um, I'm sorry, we got to share cameras here.
That's
My
okay.
phone always acts up with this StreamYard thing here. But what's interesting is that this is not something that just happened because of COVID. We
Mm-hmm.
keep trying to explain to folks that this is, been going on. This is systematic. This has been going on. This is systemic. This has been going on for decades. The original Baltimore Black think tank with Sister Vicky Harding, who ran for mayor, with David Anthony Wiggins and David L. Johnson and Darren Muhammad, and
Mm-hmm.
at the time, Baba Tommy Curtis was still alive. Our great elder Baba Tommy Curtis, who was leading the Baltimore Black think tank. They actually went into the schools back in, I believe it was 2006, 2008. And they actually, had to fight the school, first of all, to even get access to do an audit. But when they did an audit, they found millions of dollars that had been either misspent, was missing, misappropriated. So we were having issues back then with just the efficiency of what was going on at North Avenue. The dollars weren't getting down to the children. We had stories back then of families who had children that were on IEPs, on independent educational plans, and they weren't getting the services, or they weren't getting the materials that they were supposed to be getting. And then an investigation finds out that the materials was sitting in a warehouse. Some of the other materials had never been delivered by the vendor, but yet the vendor still, submitted an invoice to the school system. So we've seen for years, as it seems like, whether it's contractors just not providing the services, North Avenue not having any system of accountability. This has been going on for decades. And then what's interesting is that we keep trying to put the blame back on parents, but the
Mm-hmm.
parents that we've spoken to in reference to this initiative keep telling us, Mr. Jason, I've spoken to the principal, I've spoken to the teachers, I've spoken to North Avenue. I continue to speak to North Avenue. I continue to try to get my child's issue resolved. And many times what we find is parents are kind of chasing their tails. They're not getting
Mm-hmm.
answers. No one is being straightforward with them. They don't return calls. They don't return messages. So you have parents that are frustrated. It's not every child that is failing in the school system doesn't have an active parent. I don't buy that. And I think that that's a cop
Mm-hmm.
out. And what we're trying to do is because we feel, for some reason, and don't get this wrong, Dr. Lady J, please don't get this wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes we look at folks that have these high statuses, They're doctors. We feel that they are the expert. They feel that they know. And
Mhm.
sometimes we over-validate them. But what we forget sometimes is, even though you have all this education in the world, there's a possibility that you still have a disconnect to the people for which you're trying to provide services and are trying to design an institution to function properly for that community. If you have no clear understanding, if your children are not even going to our public schools, if you don't understand the urban environment in Baltimore City, what it's
Mhm.
like to be a child of lead paint poisoning, a child that's dealing with PTSD because they just lost a family member. When you don't understand these dynamics of the community, you end up with a broken system like we see now that's not
Mhm.
catering to the children. And that's
Mhm.
why I really jumped on board with this, because for me, enough is enough. I've had a child that graduated out of Augustus Fells, and I can tell you that his diploma is not worth jack. His,
Mm.
his diploma is not worth jack. I've also
Wow.
watched as my grandbabies who have gone to great charter schools where teachers and principals and those who are invested in the charter schools are taking the time to educate our children. And I've watched as North Avenue has attacked these schools. Monarch Academy was a great school on Kirk Avenue. You ask
Mhm.
all those middle school and elementary students that went to Monarch Academy, they will tell you that that was an excellent school. But they still attacked Monarch Academy just like they attacked Carl Stokes Charter School. These schools were thinking outside of the box, and we're trying to cater to the educational needs of our children based on the environment and the conditions and the households from which they were coming from. And that's
Mhm.
what we're not getting from North Avenue.
Wow. Jason, you said a mouthful. Oh my goodness. And I 100% I agree with every single thing that you said because I am an educator. So I understand every single thing that you said, and it's frustrating when you're a teacher and you're trying to teach children who cannot read, children who don't understand. And like you said, it's not always because they didn't get something in the next grade. Sometimes it's a learning disability. I had the students with the IEPs. And like you said, it's lead paint. It's children that are coming from abusive homes, children that haven't eaten that day or the day before. It's a whole bunch of stuff going on that needs to be addressed in addition to teaching the children. And I found myself, I'm the parent, I'm the mother and father, I'm the teacher, I'm the psychiatrist, psychologist. You just become the doctor, you're everything in the classroom. In Baltimore, it's clear in Baltimore that this is a huge, huge issue and it's not being addressed. I have no clue why it's being overlooked, why it's not being addressed, why it's okay for somebody to make so much money. And these children are just failing. Like it's terrible.
I can
Yolanda,
tell
I
you
want you
why.
to
I can
comment.
tell you
Go ahead,
why.
Jason. Go
You
ahead.
you you have someone that's from Boston, Massachusetts, that
Mm-hmm.
has absolutely no root or no connection to Baltimore City. Just recently, the distinguished attorney Billy Murphy Esquire,
Mm-hmm.
was on WEAA and laid it out on WEAA. He said then, he said that the problem with the school system has been going on for decades. They have not been catering to the environmental needs of these children. They know these
Mm-hmm.
children, like you said, are hungry, coming to school hungry. The first meal of the day, a lot of cases, is in the school. And then when you
Yes.
close the school down for in-person learning, now in some cases, you've made it difficult for some of these children to get the nourishment of the day. And so
Mm-hmm.
we're not thinking outside of the box in some cases. For instance, like with this pandemic, prime example, there was an article in Educational Weekly that talked about going into crisis mode. They compared it to the Apollo 12 mission. The Apollo
Mm.
12 mission, if folks don't know the history, the Apollo 12 was supposed to go to the moon. It was supposed to be one of the first rockets to go to the moon. Before they got to the moon, something mechanically went wrong, and they went into a recovery mode of just trying to get the astronauts home safely. What Educational Weekly pointed out was many of these CEOs and superintendents of these schools did not go into crisis mode. And they didn't work with the ground control, the astronauts, with engineering, with the parents. They didn't work with the whole collective group to really
Mm-hmm.
understand that there's going to be some educational deficiencies. So let's throw some resources to that. Let's make sure
Right.
the children have access to nourishment, because we
Mm-hmm.
know the schools are closed. And, let's make sure that we ensure that there is a conduit that allows them to get access to breakfast, lunch, and even in some cases dinner, because for
Right.
some children, that's their only meal of the day. So,
That's it.
so if you know that these were the issues and you didn't go into crisis mode, and all you're really doing in some cases, what we see with almost every crisis in Baltimore City, what we see them doing is playing damage control.
Mm-hmm.
Playing damage. Something's wrong with Augustus Fells. Now you want to fire the vice principal and the principal. Now you
Right.
want to have an investigation. Now you
Mm-hmm.
want to get down to what's going on in the school system. But that's after the fact. That's after the fact. You have COVID, and you know that children are having issues with the digital divide, which I keep saying there is no such thing as the digital divide.
Right.
Comcast is accessible to every home. There's not one home that pole and what they call the tap that you connect to is not
Mm-hmm.
available outside of almost every home. Where the issue lies at is whether or not that family can afford to have it put
Right.
into their home. And that's
Right.
where real outside of the box thinking comes in at. If you're in
Mm-hmm.
crisis mode, you work with Comcast and say, I need you, regardless of what people think, you're the only choice. I need you. I need to make sure that all 80,000 of my students are connected by any means necessary, and make
Mm-hmm.
that partnership and make those relationships happen. You know how
Yeah.
the relationship happened with Comcast and the students? It happened because of people empowered by the struggle. Because we attended the meeting, which was the first meeting for the digital divide meeting that Zeke Cohen held almost 2 weeks, 3 weeks before school started. Dr. Santelises didn't even show up. She sent
Wow.
her aides, she sent her assistants there. But you would think that something as important as the digital divide, 3 weeks before the school system is going to start, you would think that you would show up to something like that so that you can fix whatever the digital divide issue was. Now, we
Mm-hmm.
pointed out at the meeting that this wasn't an issue of access. The access is there. The issue is making sure that Comcast understands what their policy is and that
Mm-hmm.
they express that policy to their sales reps. Because what was happening was people that had bills, unfortunately, they were not allowing them to get the service. They were actually telling them they didn't qualify. But actually,
Wow.
Comcast corporate had a moratorium. They said that even if you have a bill, even if it's less than a year old, you are still entitled to Comcast Essentials because of the need of the children during this school cycle. And there was a
Mm-hmm.
disconnect between that. But that's where a real CEO comes in at. That's what we keep
Mm-hmm.
trying to tell people, that this is where she drops the ball at on little things. The school bell is still going to ring on time. The cafeteria and lunch still happens at the same time. School
Mm-hmm.
classes are going to switch at the same time. All of that stuff works. But the stuff that doesn't work, or the unforeseeable events that may happen that may affect our children's education, this is where great leadership, this is where good leadership comes in at, and this is not what we're getting.
Yeah, can I
Wow.
weigh in real quick?
Go ahead, Yolanda. Sure. Sure.
Well, I can tell you another problem is another problem that we have with the amounts of money that people are getting, or the higher hierarchies are. The more money they get, the less attentive they become. They
Mm-hmm.
don't pay you no attention because now they feel like I don't have to. Um,
Right.
if we stop trying to lay down with the devil and think we're going to wake up with a blessing, that's another reason. And another thing is that she's not approachable. She's not.
Mm-hmm.
She's not one of them ones that you can. She got a whole bunch of this going on, and she's not approachable at all. Um,
Mm-hmm.
People just acting like we want her to resign because of COVID. If anybody had been actually paying any attention, this is the stuff that had been going on for decades.
Mm-hmm.
She walked into it on purpose. They tell me she got there and it was already there, but she knew about it because she worked under Alonzo, and she still let them raise her pay by cutting and then cut teachers, which did not make sense to me. When we don't make it about the children first, and there is no accountability, then they feel like they don't have to answer to us, but they could take our taxpayers' money.
Mm-hmm.
All this is a big, huge problem for us. And the reason why we was just sitting around one day and we was looking at TV, And me and my sister was actually on the internet because we do a lot of research, especially on a lot of things. She lives in Baltimore County. I live in Baltimore City. And we was so happy to talk about education. I said, well, you know what? She got to go. So my sister said, well, let's call for her resignation. I said, you're absolutely right. We need to call for her resignation. So when we spoke to Shannon right now, Shannon was like, you're absolutely right. We need to call for her resignation. And when we took it to our board, everybody basically had the same reaction because I still have skin in the game. I still have a 16-year-old son that goes to Baltimore City School. I have grandchildren that go to Baltimore schools. And it's easier for them to point out the parent or say that it's the parent's fault because we don't know which parent to go to and say, hey, well, they saying that it's you need to fix your issue. It's too broad of a spectrum of saying that it's the parents. But the thing is, leaders lead, regardless of anything. We make the tough decisions, right, wrong, or indifferent. We make those decisions and we stick with them. She is not a leader. She does not lead anything. She just dictates and take money and this, that, and the third. And like I said, in 2016, 2017, the Sun paper was tearing her up, missing money. Millions of dollars being missing out of school budget. And when they called and asked her to explain it, she ignored everybody. When grade changing went on, they called her and asked her to explain it. She ignored it. Oh, well, it's under investigation. How long did it take to do an investigation? And why do they continue to let her do an internal investigation is what gets me. It grinds my gears because still there is no accountability. And for these people to say that she's doing a great job, I'm trying to figure out, did they go to Baltimore educational school systems because they're delusional?
Well, I want to say this. My son is 25. This is how long, and I said this when I was on Fox 45. This is how long this has been going on. I only have one child, but he's 25 years old. This was going on 25 years ago. And when I went to enroll him in school, when he was 5 years old, getting ready for kindergarten and all of that, and I'm one of those parents, I check out everything that's going on with the schools. In my area, where he would have had to go to school, I was like, this ain't going to work. This is not going to work. And I continue to watch the school system over the years. He's 25 years old, now has graduated from college, and they still doing the same exact thing. The same exact thing.
Well, you have to understand that if it's already a way that you could get away with certain things and not be held accountable, they're going to keep that system in place.
Yeah.
They kept it in place for a reason because it's a way that money can come up missing and nobody has to answer for it. I'm trying to figure out, why is this a $1 billion corporation, a $1 billion a year corporation, $1.3 billion corporation, and there's no oversight committee. Certain things just don't make. If it don't make a dollar, it doesn't. If it don't make sense, it does not make a dollar. So if any, and me and JC use this analysis all the time. If big, huge companies, even down to Burger King, if you're not performing your job, they fire you. And we're in a state where it's fire at will, except for the CEO of Baltimore. Why is that?
And when she's talking about the firing part, what's interesting is that they don't blame the employees, they don't blame sales, they don't blame inventory. They look at the CEO to lead them out of whatever the issue is that corporation is going with. And I think folks have to understand that there's a difference in structure. We don't have a school superintendent, we have a CEO. So we're expecting that CEO, in many cases, to be an administrator. We're expecting them to lead a corporation with a $1.3 billion budget. And what we're finding is that there's so many deficiencies. And that's another thing. That's where real leadership steps up at. If you know that you have...
We can't hear you, Jason.
we might have got...
Okay.
Sorry about that. What I was saying was that where real leadership kicks in at is when you have a system where people are taking advantage, whether it's taking advantage of the corporation, taking advantage of those who you're supposed to provide products and services to. As a leader, it is important for you so that you don't damage the reputation of the institution or the functionality of the institution, it's important for you to go out there and to address those issues with your managers, with your supervisors, with your executive level people. And what we see is too many times principals not being rung in, not being brought in when they need to be brought in, schools that are underperforming, they're not getting the resources that they're supposed to.
Don't forget the principals that's been left Baltimore City schools and went over in different countries
and still getting paid.
And still getting paid.
You have, principals that are getting $100,000 salaries that are not even in the school system anymore, which doesn't make any sense to me.
Been going on for years.
And what needs to be done as a leader is she needs to ring in the leadership that's in our school system that are doing these improper procedures that we know are not going to benefit our children in the long run. Like,
but if it was about benefiting the children and educating the children, it wouldn't have become so ingrained in Baltimore City public schools. That is now the norm. Get the money, keep the money, and let the kids fend for themselves.
Yeah, and another problem is that you're trying to blame the same parents that was failed by Baltimore City schools. You're trying.
Very good point.
Right, you're trying to hold them accountable for them not being able to teach their children when they was a part of the same system that failed the children. Doesn't Absolutely. Make
sense. This has been going on for generations, and folks need to understand. Parents have the ability to take control of the situation. They really do. They got to step up, step out, speak up. It can't just be a select few that's willing to say something. It can't just be a select few that's willing to try and find solutions for everyone. It has to be a concerted effort of the parents in the city.
And I think the other issue too that I wanted to point out is that there seems to be a blame game going on here. When you speak to the mayor's office says we're not responsible. It's a state issue. Just today, they spoke to the governor, and the governor again put it back. Well, yesterday, they spoke to the governor, and the governor put it back on the school system locally, back to local authority. So you have folks that keep blaming. They're playing this blame game. You just had just recently folks saying that it's the teacher's fault. We were watching online some of the feedback off of Fox 45's Facebook page, and people were trying to blame the teachers, trying to blame the parents. But how do you blame a teacher when I've seen this at Baybrook Elementary?
Oh, we can't hear you, Jason. I think it went out again.
I apologize. People keep trying to call us. Stop calling us, people, for right now. But we've seen this. Like, for instance, when my child was at Baybrook Elementary, we had classrooms where they had no books, and they were actually retrographing the one teacher's edition that they had. They were making copies of the book to be able to pass out so that the children could have the lessons from the science book. Like, who do you blame on that? You don't blame the teacher who can't get access to the materials. You blame the system who's getting buku amount of money, but yet that money doesn't seem to be getting into the children's hands as far as materials and supplies and the things that teachers need to be able to educate our children. That's not the parents' fault. That's not the teacher's fault. And these are the things that have been going on far too long within the school system. And you have to remember, like Yolanda said, our CEO was originally the chief academic officer under Dr. Alonzo for 2 years, which is the second highest position. So she's been around. It's almost like when a lot of us say, Brandon's been around for almost 12 years at City Hall. He sat on the public safety committee. He should know better by now. So if he comes into the mayor's position, a lot of us were really expecting our mayor to really have some sort of plan because he's been around for a while. It's the same thing. If Dr. Santelises has been around for almost 8 years, if not longer, in the Baltimore City school system, shouldn't she have some sort of better direction for us to go in than what we're currently seeing now and what we were seeing within the 4 years, 5 years under her leadership. We weren't seeing any growth. We weren't seeing any development. We were seeing schools that were underperforming. There was some strides here and there. Yes, there were some achievements here and there, but the majority of the system was broken and non-functional. And what we know is that anytime we have issues within our educational system, within the next few years, we see spikes within crimes within our community because we're not
Yep.
giving the young folks the
Mhm.
tools that they need to be independent, to function in a dog eat dog society. We're not giving them the tools to be competitive in this competitive world. And then we're expecting them to go out there and behave themselves in the
Mhm.
process. They're not going to do that. They're going to go
Mhm.
out there and survive by any means necessary, even if it means knocking your little ass over and taking it from you in the process.
Yep.
And this is what we have to correct. And the only way that we can correct it, unfortunately, is we have recourse. We have recourse. We could demand that the school system goes into federal receivership, and we can really get some guidelines, some federal guidelines, some corrective guidelines in place. And if that's not good enough, and we can't get the federal Department of Education to act and to correct the issues that are going on at North Avenue, then we still have recourse. And we can go and file a class action lawsuit. And there's plenty of families. There are plenty of victims. There are plenty of plaintiffs. There are plenty of children to line up to testify to the fact that we have a broken system that is failing our communities.
Wait a minute. See, another problem that we have is that, during the pandemic, it really showed. See, we already knew what was going on in Baltimore City schools.
Mhm.
And just like I said, we all failed these children because we sat back too long and we said nothing. But the pandemic is what really brought everything to light of how our children are being mistreated, miseducated. It's educational homicide, and that's what I call it. Because in Baltimore County, what they did was they gave their children everything they needed, even down to books and laptops and everything to bring home. Baltimore City did not provide that. If we were going into a pandemic, and this was well before the next year came in, books should have been ordered.
Right.
Every school, every child should have had it, came home with books. They should have came home with laptops, everything that they needed for their parents to try to help them succeed and become an educator or help become a paraeducator within Baltimore City schools. You cannot expect these parents to educate children, just like I said before, when the system failed them and their parents too. So how do you expect them to educate anything?
That's exactly the expectation. If I don't teach you, if you don't know how to do it, you're going to do the best that you think you can. And if I stay quiet, you're not going to bother me and everything is just going to kind of float along. So it's time for folks to not be quiet. There's some things that we need to see done. Dr. Santelises needs to go. We need a fully elected school board. We need term limits for our other elected folk that don't want to hold folks' feet to the fire. We need academic savings accounts in the state so that parents have options and opportunity to make the correct choices for their children instead of being held hostage by the Board of Education, whether it's Baltimore or another city. But Baltimore has an opportunity right now. COVID was a crisis. It was an opportunity to press reset, and we missed the opportunity. But this group is not going to allow them to continue to miss the opportunity. We're going to hold them accountable. We're going to move forward with the lawsuit. We're going to move forward with the legislative options. This is not going to go away. We are not going to go away.
So let me ask you this, because this is something that, a couple of things I want to ask all three of you. You can answer. One is, uh, actually, it's three things. One is just a statement. Me being out in the community, the one thing that I was really bothered with is that I was running into a lot of parents who have children who have not been to school the entire school year because of this pandemic and because of not having a computer. Some parents didn't even have money for internet. And so you got children who are already a year behind. Now we're talking about going back to school. And my thing is, where do we begin? It's like these kids are going to be so far behind. The other thing I want to ask you all is, do you really believe? I mean, like, honestly, because I've just kind of given up. Do you really believe that people who are in a position to make some changes, that they really do want to make change? Because what's the problem?
No.
Good, Pastor.
No, they don't want to make change. If they wanted to make change, we wouldn't be sitting here on your show right now talking about this issue that is not new. They don't want to make change. They want people to just go back to sleep because they want all the quote woke folk to go back to sleep so they can continue to do what they've been doing. We talk about, see, I'm about to get myself in trouble. People talk about structural racism, right? So what amazes me is that in a city like Baltimore, where we are led by people that are black and brown like us, they have learned from massa how to be the new massa. And we are all being held hostage in the second coming of slavery. And the children are paying the price. And I'd be doggone if
Wow.
I'm going to stand for it. This
Wow.
cannot continue. You want to talk about structural racism? Well, you look like the one that was holding the people down. What's your excuse?
Mm.
Brandon talks about, and Mayor Scott, I swear, if you hear this, I hope you take it to heart. You talk about your son in Baltimore. Everybody's very proud of being from Baltimore, being in Baltimore. You say you've never left Baltimore. But let me tell you something. We're all paying for that. And I'm going to tell you why. Because if you're a son of Baltimore that's never left Baltimore and knows nothing other than Baltimore, you do not have a clue what success looks like. And we are all paying for it.
Mm.
Mm,
Preach.
Wow.
that's deep. That's
Wow.
deep.
Wow.
I'd like to talk about this COVID thing and this digital divide thing. Again, I'm a clear cut person. I'm a person in Yolanda, and I think Pastor is starting to see this from me. I'm a type person that if there's a solution, don't give me some sort of excuse as to why not to utilize the solution. And this is what I mean. We keep talking about there was a digital divide, and I keep telling folks that that was a misnomer. That there was not clear communication with Comcast and with the parents to let them know that there were resources. So there's no
Mm-hmm.
excuse. You didn't have money. Guess what? Comcast informed us, the executives informed us after we spoke to them. They told us that they had grant money available. They had
Wow.
millions of dollars of grant money available that a parent who qualifies, if they qualify for school lunch, if they live it under a certain economic status, they qualified for the grants. They were paying the Comcast Essential Service the $10, $12, however much it was per month. They were paying for it for a whole school year. For a whole
What?
year. There was
Wow.
no excuse. The problem was communication. And that's again where great leadership comes in at. When you're under a crisis, you communicate to the people exactly how to move and navigate through a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to the other issue that you added, that you had students that just disappeared off the map. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
really seem like we were proactive in addressing these needs. What's interesting was, and me and Yolanda found this out the other day when we were talking about these laptops. These laptops, if they break, you were unable to just go to the store and buy a Chromebook. You had to get the book issued, you had to get the device issued from the school system. There was a reason why, because it had an application on there that tracked everything that went on that computer. This is how we know that. There were children within the community that were searching up. They were depressed because of COVID. They weren't seeing their friends. They weren't going out. They were doing searches for suicide online. And immediately the school
What?
system sent a Department of Bureau of Child Care and Welfare to these homes to identify what the issue was. And they told them that based off of the search, off of their school devices, that they had been searching for suicide techniques online. So what we realized was they were tracking all data, and it makes sense. If you're doing at home learning, if you're doing virtual learning, it's important to have these metrics in place so that you can measure the children's performance. But what we're saying is if you're collecting this data, what are you doing with this data? And this data
Mm.
should be able to tell you that you have 2,000 students that have dropped off the map. What
Right.
happened to truancy enforcement? What happened to knocking on doors? Everybody keeps telling me about this Miss White. Miss White was this famous truancy officer in Baltimore City that didn't play. And you didn't want her to knock on your door and ask you why your child wasn't in school. This should be the case now. This should
Mm-hmm.
be the case now. We should not allow over 2,000 students to fall to the crack. If not, if we don't address that issue, what happens is those 2,000 students, like Dr. Tyrone Powers said, we will be looking for those students in the streets to round them up under a public safety initiative, as opposed to trying to round them up and get them educated.
Can I
Mm-hmm.
piggyback off of
Mm-hmm.
what Pastor said? In 2021, the new masses became. If anybody ever seen the movie Django,
Mm-hmm.
when you
Mm-hmm.
have the ones who's telling the slaves,
Mm-hmm.
who's that nigga on that nair? That's the favorite part I had. But how many Samuel L. Jacksons do we have sitting in place of leadership
Mm-hmm.
that we know that does not run, the person that's there does not run Baltimore City government. It's those ones who chose to sell our city out. And that's why we have a lot of outsiders that come in and be able to sit in these high positions and these high seats because it's a favor for a favor. Just like Santa Lise. Santa Lise only got in because she was Pugh's frat sister. So
Mm-hmm.
it's always a favor for a favor. And, a lot of things need to start being investigated. These people that sit on the board of commissions with these nonprofits who don't get paid, but they're well off living.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things need to be exposed. And right now, it's time for us to start exposing and let the devil rear his ugly head, because the Bible tells us sooner or later he will rear his ugly head. And it also tells us in the book of Joshua that he's going to send a pandemic through the land because you did your poor people and your widows wrong. So that's
Mm-hmm.
why we're still sitting in COVID. If you don't
Mm-hmm.
start doing right by the people, that's why we're people empowered by the struggle, not
Mm-hmm.
politics empowered by the struggle, not money empowered by the struggle, not favors empowered by the struggle. We're people empowered by the struggle, because in order to know him, you have to be them. And we are
Mm-hmm.
the people who still have stakes out here in these streets and in this educational system. And like I said, when one child fail and one child get murdered, we all fail. So
Mm-hmm.
it's no pointing the finger. It's no finger pointing, because at the end of the day, all this mess is a business to them. Because if you cut crime, there's no more billions of dollars to come in for crime prevention, not solution, crime prevention. Educational failure, then there's no more money that comes in for these IEPs and all this other special stuff that they done put in place. It's all set by design. But like I said, it's time to break that circle. And I have lost a lot of people in the streets, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And now
Mm-hmm.
we great go do the same thing with my niece. And I feel like at the end of the day, I failed her.
Mm. Mm. Wow. Wow. Now, you said something just now that kind of touched me, Yolanda, because do you guys ever feel like you're, I don't even know how to put this, but it's like it's certain things that you don't touch because you could be putting yourself at risk or your family at risk by dealing with certain issues, because I see that a lot in our city where once people start talking about certain things, or and they just keep talking about it and they keep going after it, or they're trying to make some kind of change, it's almost like you become a target. Do you all ever feel like that?
Are you
Because I
talking about
know,
like the spy plane?
yeah, Jason.
Well, see, that's the thing is that nobody never knows who's connected to who. It's by sheer
True.
coincidence that this stuff is happening. And like I said, when one person fails, when these children out here and these babies out here is dying in these streets, we when you point, it's always that one that point back at you.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it's still a gun, and we all carrying it. When we sit back and let these children, you know, indulge in educational homicide, we have to call it the way it is, because she's killing
Hmm.
all the hopes and dreams and
Yeah.
aspirations and ambitions out of all these children.
Hmm.
Because even down to the uniforms that they wear, everything is that pipeline to prison. It's that
Hmm.
uniformness. And we're not, and my nephew actually called it. He said, Auntie, my nephew actually, when my sister's son had came to stay with me for 1 year, he was from the county, and he
Hmm.
came and stayed in Baltimore City for 1 year. This is sad. They told him he was too smart to be in Baltimore City schools.
Wow.
What does that
Wow.
say? A lot of things speaks volumes. And when people and systems and everything show you who they are, take them at their word. Stop trying to, that he looks so this, that, and the third, and he We got to get out of this old slave mentality. And these ones who's out here voting, they're the problem. And I'm going to say it. I say stuff that people won't say. Voters are the problem because they keep voting in the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So who's insane, you or me? If we're asking for change, then you have to change everything. It's just like going to an NA meeting and say change people, places, and things. Some of these things need to be adopted into a lot of our systems. It has to change. Stop thinking that a politician is going to come down and play Jesus. He's not. She's not. The thing is with a politician, when you vote them in, you got what you deserved and what you asked for, because their job is to protect the money, special interest groups, and all this in the government, and everything else. My job as a people's titian is to protect the people. It's a difference. It's a total difference. And I will hit somebody in the mouth for calling me a politician. I promise you.
Wow. Wow. And for those of you who might be listening or watching, she was actually running. She was actually running for office. And I had her on the show. But listen, guys, we're at the end of this, but this is so interesting because I love talking about education. I really do. This is really interesting, but I do want to say to you, Yolanda, Jason, Pastor Shannon, please be careful out there. We know what it is. We know what it is without going into detail. So please be careful out there. I love what you're doing, and I support it in every way. And I want you all to just tell us, you all can take a few minutes, each of you, and just tell us about the rally tomorrow, how people can get information about it, coming out and all of that. And what exactly is your goal for tomorrow?
Well, actually, due to the weather, we're not expecting a lot of people to come out. But if you're willing to stand with us, because rain, sleet, snow, or shine, we're out there. Because we understand that these babies are in need. We understand that, everything has to change. So regardless of weather, we're out there. We're willing to stand strong, boots on the ground, and we will continue to walk and march. Because one thing it didn't stop our ancestors for putting it in.
That's
so
right.
It's not going to stop us from putting it in. So I want to thank Shannon for believing in people empowered by the struggle and partnering with us. She has been a tremendous help and a tremendous woman of God and a tremendous and I'm going to say, because I'm always in a leadership position, but in order to be a good leader, you have to be an effective follower. And I do not mind jumping behind, and this is with all of us. We jump behind each other and let each other lead. So it's not just my initiative, and it's not just her initiative, it's ours, because we believe in saving all and leaving no baby behind.
Right.
Yolanda, I got to say, and I haven't said this in these words before, but it was your spirit and your energy behind this that let me know it wasn't just going to be another effort where people sat and talked and said and did absolutely nothing. I just don't have the patience for that anymore. But to work with a group that is about doing something and seeing success, seeing progress, moving the issue, the cause forward, the solution, I always make time for that. That's what we need more of in this city.
So we will be in front of City Hall at 5:00 tomorrow, rain or shine. Except for thunder. I'll be hiding.
Well, lightning is a little questionable.
I'll be hiding in the car.
I might be in the car when the lightning starts. But other than that, I'll be there. So, LadyJ, may I ask, if we can share the flyer with you, would you be willing to share it with your audience?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I'm like I told you guys, I'm in Delaware right now, but if somebody streams it, I can actually stream it through here too. So just let me know. We'll talk about it. Just let me know. I'll do whatever I can to help.
And for the listeners, my husband is just telling me that one of us just said City Hall, not Board of Education.
I mean, Board of Education. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
Board of Education. Right.
Okay. So we're on North Avenue at Board of Education, 5:00 tomorrow, rain or shine. Our kids, all the kids of Baltimore City are depending on us to be what we know we're supposed to be. So let's get it done.
I wanted to close out with just reminding folks what this is all about. This is about having a fully elected school board, that the people have a choice to decide who will lead us, who will lead our schools, for the people, by the people. We're looking at, we want to bring back local control so we can stop that back and forth We don't
Mm-hmm.
have control. The state has control. The state says the city has control. Enough is enough. Every other
Yeah.
county
Yeah.
has local control of the school system. We can definitely get this done now. I think we're more than capable to run our own school system and be accountable to our own school system. We're looking for also a process that allows the people to decide who the CEO is, and a recall process if that CEO is not performing well. The other thing
Mm-hmm.
that we're looking for as well, and we forgot to kind of really point out, is that we really need a full audit. We really need a
Mm-hmm.
forensic audit. I know that Dr. Santelises, who has come before the educational committee in City Hall, has expressed the fact that she did do an audit and she was able to find, where some of the money was going in reference to our children's education. But for me, nothing is going to settle my mind that our children are getting every dollar that they deserve until we have a full forensic audit, at least going back a decade or two, that really shows us exactly
Yep.
what's been going on with this billions of dollars that they get year over year. And we're getting ready to get more money because we're
Mm-hmm.
allocated for more funding because of the Kerwin formula and the passing of Kerwin.
Right.
So
Right.
we're
Right.
expected to get more money. So we want to make sure moving forward, if there are those deficiencies, if we are misappropriating or misspending money, that we go through and make sure that we fix those financial issues so that
Mm-hmm.
we can turn around and be able to better spend any new allocated money coming into the system so that our children get exactly what it is they deserve,
They
a
deserve
good
it.
quality education.
And
So
Mm-hmm.
and to
come
be
out
clear,
tomorrow.
that fiscal audit needs to be fiscal and financial and independent. You cannot
Correct.
have the rooster checking to see what damage was done in the hen house. Got to be independent.
Can you are you all willing to come back like next Tuesday? So what is this? Today is Tuesday. No, not next Tuesday because I'll be out of town. I'll give you a day, but
Right.
I need you all to come back because Jason, you just said something. You said a lot, and I really think it's like you said earlier, a lot of times people don't know certain things, and so they move and operate in a certain way. But I think if more information was put out, some of the things that you just said, if it was put out there where people know what's going on and how they can make a change, because a lot of people I talk to, they feel like they can't make a change when it comes to the school system, or the school superintendent, or they have to deal with what's going on. And I think when they hear it from other people and actually hear that you can make a difference, you really can. So if you all are willing, I would absolutely love for you to come back so we can have that conversation and really break it down to people. Even when you were talking about the whole Comcast thing, I wasn't aware of that. So it's just certain things that people don't know. And I always say information is definitely power.
And if there's
And
any families
yeah,
that need the information in relations to Comcast, please reach out to us because we still have the direct tie into the executive offices. And if you're having issues getting connectivity, or if you're looking for resources to pay for it for the year because you can't afford it, reach out to us. We will make sure that you get the information that's needed.
wow, that's amazing. And you guys, please share the video because the last time I did a video with some teachers about the school system, it was black. And I'm pretty sure people were calling and getting it blocked and everything. But we got to get this information out there some kind of way. And we're just still going to keep having the conversation, whether it's blocked or not. We're going to still keep having this conversation because we're talking about our future. And right now, too many of our bright lights are in the ground, and we
Mhm.
got to figure out how to stop that from happening. Yolanda, condolences to you and your family right now with what you're going through. Everybody, please keep her family in prayer. She lost her niece again to the violence. Um, like I saw your post, Jason. A bunch of people out there looking, but nobody saw anything. And we gotta stop doing that too, y'all. We really gotta stop. It's just crazy. We're losing too many of our beautiful young people. So I got to move on to the next show. But Yolanda, Jason, Pastor Shannon, thank you so much for coming on. I'll be with you guys in spirit tomorrow. Please let me know how I can help tomorrow. As far as I'll put the flyer out if you want to live stream or whatever. Just let me know, and I'll definitely be in touch to see if we can get together next week to have this conversation. And you guys have a great night. Be safe out there.
Thank you for
Thank
the
you.
All right.
opportunity.
Thank you.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.